Good evening and welcome to the Springfield High School Commons for this special Anti-Bullying Month event with a focus on cyberbullying. It is a relatively recent phenomenon. Bullying has been around as long as students have been around, but the world of cyberspace and internet has made its reach around the clock and around the globe. We have a panel of local experts here who will be assisting us in trying to crack this problem and find workable solutions for parents, students, teachers, and the entire community. We'll introduce our panelists one at a time and ask each of them to reflect on this particular issue from their area of expertise. And our first panelist this evening is Cindy Knight. She is the Supervisor of Student Support Services for Springfield School District 186. Cindy, good evening.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. My role, as you mentioned, is in Student Support Services for the school district, and just in terms of my personal passion as well, helping our students benefit from the great teaching and great instruction that goes on every day in our schools. Part of the needs that we have is to create healthier and more conducive settings so that kids can really benefit from that great instruction. So I see my role in helping facilitate safe and respectful environments for our kids, and addressing this issue is one of those big components.
Our next panelist is Christine Feller, Internet Safety Specialist with the High Tech Crime Bureau of the Office of the Illinois Attorney General. Christine, what is the role of the Attorney General and other state agencies in dealing with this particular problem?
Sure. The role of the Attorney General's office in working with students across the state of Illinois is to complement the digital safety requirements that are required of all students in Illinois, grades levels 3 through 12, and in working with our students on those issues, one of those specifically being cyberbullying. With technology available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's important to talk to our youth about setting boundaries and thinking about what they post.
Our next panelist is Karen Stramer, Assistant Principal at Franklin Middle School. Obviously, the cyberbullying problem can affect anyone at any age, but as a particular concern for school children, particularly in the middle and high school years. Karen, you've had some experience with this. Tell us what you can about this issue of cyberbullying.
The issue is becoming more and more prevalent in the schools as kids younger and younger get cell phones and have access to the internet. The problems we see are our kids saying things and doing things in the comfort of their homes, and then coming to school to face the person they've been targeting or they've been talking to. And a lot of times what that does is it turns into a conflict at school, and we have to deal with that. And it usually ends up involving a number of kids who have seen it, because everything it's just out there. So if one person sees it, 100 sees it, and then it triggers a movement from there. And we also include a lot of parents in that education and in dealing with those situations.
The response at the school level is multifaceted. It involves obviously intervention, counseling, support, but can also involve discipline as well. Mike Zimmers is the president of the Springfield School Board. Mike, let's talk about this from a student discipline perspective here. What are the potential consequences for students who are engaged in this?
Well, possible consequences. You know, we do have a bullying policy in this district. We've had it several years. We developed it before the state actually made us develop a bullying policy. And I've been highly involved with PBIS in this district also. And one of the things we're trying to do through PBIS now, not only do we have consequences, but to make students aware, that students, especially that are being bullied, that they do have avenues within the school to help with bullying. And there's several programs that we're trying to institute to deal with this. One of the things I want to talk about tonight, I want to talk directly to parents about this, is as far as privacy versus safety. And what I mean by that, I think a lot of us, I know when my child was young, she's now an adult, you want to get your child a cell phone to be able to communicate with you. You want them to be able to have a computer to do the things they need to do with schoolwork and whatever. There's a certain amount of privacies we want to afford our children, but I think our number one job is their safety. And some of the things I've heard, I've been at Christine's workshop that she had for parents. There's some scary things out there now, and I think parents, we need in this role, and I'm not talking about anybody's role as a parent here, I'm talking as a parent. When children have these devices in their hands, I think we need to think more as a parent and not as their friend. That when we hand over a telephone to a child or a computer, You should be able to know what apps to put on those computers and those phones for privacy. You need to be able to check those things. This may sound a little harsh, but I believe this as a parent. Your child did not buy that phone or that computer. You bought it. It's your computer. It's your phone. So I would be vigilant if I were a parent to check these things for the safety of your child.
Clearly, this is a problem that can be serious enough that it crosses into the realm of law enforcement. Our next two panelists will address the issue from that perspective. First, Sangamon County State's Attorney John Millhiser.
Oh, thank you, Jim, and thanks for having me here. And thanks to all those who attended, because it is an important issue. And I'd like to echo what Mike said as far as communication. If you're a parent, communicate with your child. Know where they are when they go on the internet. Know the different sites. And I've participated with Christine Feller when we talk to parents and also talk to students around District 186 and throughout the county on social media. And cyberbullying is just one aspect of it. And the importance from the state's attorney's perspective is, my perspective is this: we take it very seriously, and we look at these cases very seriously. I have 3 attorneys in the office assigned to my juvenile division, and what they do is they prosecute delinquent kids and parents who aren't doing a good job. They work in juvenile probation and law enforcement in these cases. But what we have to do when we get reports in is balance, the rights of the students. Balance. We all have kids, and we all were young at one time, and we joke around. But it can get to the level where it's not a joke. It's very, very serious, and we do take these cases very seriously. And before coming here tonight, I kind of went through the statute book and looked at some different criminal charges that could be filed, from cyber stalking to harassment by electronic means. And going throughout the Illinois Criminal Code, there are close to 30 different criminal charges that are possible, including one that's just in the juvenile code, which is basically, we call it sexting. That's not the word, but that's a problem too, and it goes along the lines of cyberbullying. These cases are very, very serious. We take them seriously, and I also field questions on a monthly basis from parents who call, who have issues, and they have concerns, and we work with them to resolve it. Maybe it's filing criminal charges. Maybe it's a letter from the state's attorney's office. Maybe it's working with the school. There's different ways of bringing the student in. So there's different things we can do to make sure it doesn't rise to the level where somebody gets seriously injured, and it's very important.
Sangamon County Under Sheriff Jack Campbell is our next panelist, and the Sheriff's Department has been working more into the area of cyber crimes. Jack, even though we're often talking about young people here, it's still a world that people patrol anonymously, and it can be sometimes difficult to track down who's really doing what to whom. How difficult are these cases to investigate and get to the bottom of?
Well, thanks for having me, Jim. I appreciate it. And it is, there are rapid advances being made in technology. One of our fears is that we can't track down who the perpetrator is. We know there's apps out there that you can hide a phone number of who's sending it. We also know that people are becoming bold by sending these anonymous threats. And again, as we said earlier, they're sitting in their living rooms doing this and under the cover of that hidden identity. So it's something we're trying to root out. We certainly are worried about somebody taking an act of furtherance. The persistent threats, the threat of physical violence is when we are most concerned about it, obviously. But it's something we don't see a lot in sheriff's jurisdiction. We have deputies working at Jefferson Middle School, and I talked to them recently, and they're not seeing reports down there. And anecdotally talking to our other deputies on the street, we're not taking a lot of reports. But we know it's there. And generally, law enforcement needs to intercede, but maybe not take action. We're not looking to hang a felony on these kids that are doing this. I think oftentimes they don't understand the consequences of their actions. However, we're there to step in and ensure that it stops. The victims of this are losing time in school. It's affecting them emotionally, and it's something we're very concerned about, and we want to work closely with the schools and with the state attorney's office to ensure we stop it.
We want to thank our panel of experts for being here this evening and remind our listeners that if you do have questions tonight for our panel of experts here, you can submit them by email, bully@wmay.com. Again, that email address, bully@wmay.com, and we will get to as many of those questions in the course of this hour as we can. But before we resume, we want to bring this home with a personal account here, someone who has been through this problem of bullying with the cyberbullying component to it. Ranice Kropp is a senior here at Springfield High School. And Ranice, thank you for sharing your story with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Pull the microphone a little bit closer if you would, and if you could just give us a little bit of your experience here, what you went through and how you dealt with it.
Well, my sophomore year I was bullied, and as if having to come to school, sit in class, go to lunch, do all that, and deal with it at school. You come home and you have to get, screenshots of what's being said about you on Twitter and Facebook, and being as if being threatened face to face wasn't enough. You have people that you don't even know that have probably never talked to you, threatening you and saying all these bad things, calling you names, saying what you look like. And it's not taken seriously. Everything is taken, when it comes to girls, it's like petty girl drama, but at a certain point, it's not petty anymore. It's actually serious.
Our first question to our panel, and a couple of you have touched upon this, and I wonder if there is a way to quantify just how prevalent this is. Jack Campbell noted that we're not necessarily getting a lot of reports. Students may be reluctant to come forward. They may be embarrassed to report this, but we know that it is a growing problem. Can anybody put some numbers on this or give us some idea as to just how common this is? How likely is it that any parent listening this evening, their child may be going through this? Mike Zimmers, go ahead.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, when you look at the data that we have in the district, it looks like at the elementary and middle school that it's more prevalent than it is at the high school because there are more reported cases of it. But I think that's a misnomer, because I think high school kids have a tendency not to report it as much as the younger kids. So it's kind of hard to get a handle on it. We only can have data around what students report to us. And what we need to get students to the point of doing is if they feel like they're being bullied, they feel like they're being harassed, they need to tell an adult, they need to tell their parents, they need to let somebody know about it. And the other thing that we've been working really hard on the last few years in the school district, if a student tells an adult that they're being bullied, we want them to take it seriously. No matter how petty it might sound to the adult, we want people to take it seriously, because you never know when it could be more serious than even, initially that. So I think at some point, especially at the high school, it's underreported.
Christine Feller, or Karen, I'm sorry, did you have something to add to this as well? Or Christine, I don't know if there are national studies that show numbers on this, or maybe anything that would show us who has a propensity to this, who's most likely to engage in this kind of cyberbullying, and who's most likely to be a victim of it.
Sure. We're looking at some of the national numbers. If you look at cyberbullying.us, some of their statistics in Pew, it's looking at roughly 10% of teens. And again, this is looking at their statistics, and girls more so involved than boys. Last year for the state of Illinois, the Attorney General's office, we performed a cyber survey of students across Illinois, and looking at grade levels 3 through 8 of teens and what their experiences are online. First, the good news, which was majority of them feel uncomfortable with online exclusion, with teasing, and rumor spreading. So that's the good news, right? Our kids don't want to be around it. They don't want to see it. They don't want to participate. But at the same time, those same Illinois students, 18% said that they felt threatened online, and another 18% have gotten into a fight, either physical or verbal, because of something that has happened online. So we know that's what's occurring across Illinois.
Our next question goes to the fact that often the people involved in this, the students who are carrying this out, consider it just to be a prank. It's a joke. Kids are mean to each other, and everybody's probably been subjected to this one time or another. Is there a way to tell when it crosses a line, when it stops being just a prank and turns into something much more harmful, much more dangerous for the victim and also for the person who's carrying it out? Karen Stramer?
I can speak for the middle school and what we've seen. I think what it's become is, with kids, a lot of times it's not reported because I think it's a common practice. And a lot of times it gets reported when the parents check the phones and they see a message that comes across there and they can't believe that someone is saying that to their child and that it's out there. So then they get upset, and then we have the discussion. And you find that kids, when their feelings are hurt, it becomes a problem. And the bulk of most of our conflicts and most of our problems with student interactions are because somebody has hurt somebody else's feelings, and it is very easy to do online. It's very easy to do with the touch of 3 fingers, and everybody sees it, and you can't take it back immediately, and other people react, and whether it's true or not, kids have a feeling that the whole world views them that way, because that's where they are. I mean, they're not fully developed adults, so they don't get it, that this is just a small group of people that are saying something. They think the whole world sees them that way, and when you're 12 and 13 and 14 years old, that's all serious. Anytime you're interfering with the mental health or stability of a child.
I want to bring Cindy Knight back into this with District 186, Supervisor of Student Support Services, to that issue, because you could see how this could very easily become an overwhelming situation for a young person, and it seems like it's just consuming everything in their life. What sorts of services are available through the district to help a student in that situation?
Well, it's very, very true that these things begin to snowball for our kids. And so one of the things that we've done in our district for a number of years is to make sure that we have school social workers, student support leaders, and school psychologists available to every school and every program. And so we are also building a system within our school district where we have a system of reporting and tracking, but also a system of responding to those reports of bullying, whether it's cyberbullying or some other form. And with that sort of setup, we now have identified people in every school who are kind of the point persons to take the lead in those investigations, and then also to coordinate some plan for action after that, which could be some individualized support services. It can also be working with administration on other disciplinary aspects of this for the aggressor. So we do have several angles, both for the target and for the aggressor.
This is News Talk 970 WMAY. We are live at the Springfield High School Commons for a special town hall meeting on cyberbullying. Again, you're invited to submit your questions to us via email to bully@wmay.com. Cindy, I want to stay with you for just a moment here, because a question from the audience asks, why is it that bullying seems to be not that visible to teachers when students all seem to know what's going on?
Well, I think that we're continuing to learn what some subtle signs are of this happening in our presence. But I think one of the things that makes this such a challenging issue to get our arms around as a community, as parents, as educators, as anyone here on this panel, is that people get really good at hiding these things. And a lot of times, kids that become very well versed at how to get ahead of what our approaches are to detect this. Sometimes we're catching up to that. So in our minds, part of this is not only having a process of reporting, but also a process of helping everyone recognize what are the signs, what are things that begin to constitute bullying, so that we're all learning together. And that means the adults are learning, as well as helping empower kids who may be aware of things going on and haven't known what to do in terms of a process of reporting. We call that the bystander effect, that sometimes kids are fearful or just haven't known where to access help for themselves or a friend. So we're kind of coming at this from all angles with awareness. I think these kinds of town hall meetings and the campaigns to really address this in a collaborative team effort is the only way to go, because otherwise it does go underground and it happens very quickly before we can get onto it. So
it seems like, and this is to any of our panelists here, it seems like another complicating factor is the fact that students tend to run in different social media circles than do their parents and then do their teachers, and they don't often intersect. And so there may be a lot of things happening out in the open, but the people who need to see it aren't seeing it. Mike Zimmers, can you weigh in on that? I mean, there are policies about, for example, teachers being in social media contact with students, are there not?
I'm sure it happens. I don't know specifically, but we definitely frown on that. You know, I really don't think as an adult, as a teacher, you should be contacting your students through social media. I think that just presents problems in different areas.
And I bring it up because essentially the question was, why don't teachers seem to know what's happening? And that's part of the problem, is that by design, they're not in those same arenas.
They're not in the same arenas. And also, you know, as we go along, we learn, like, you know, students don't really use Facebook anymore. They're doing more Twitter. They're doing more Snapchat. You know, it's kind of hard to keep up with all this, actually. You know, as soon as you think that you have one of these apps down, then a new app comes out. So I think as a parent, I think that's why we have to be vigilant, because you have to stay on top of this. You have to know what apps are out there so you know what to look for, because kids will find these apps, will be very good at hiding them, because they want to be part of the social media scene, and so they're not necessarily going to tell their parent that, okay, I found this new app that I can use for social media.
Our next question coming from the audience asking about what can parents do to be more aware of what their children are doing in general in social media, particularly when it starts to cross that line into harassment or abuse, but just anything that could potentially be dangerous, harmful, or just beyond what that child is ready for. What are some tips for parents to help them keep better tabs on their children's involvement in social media?
Just a few tips for social media with our youth and our teens. It's making sure that, one, that they're ready for the sites and for the apps that they're on, and that the apps are age appropriate. Most apps, the suggested age is 13. It is very common in the state of Illinois, again, when we're working with our youth, the average age for social media first account is 10. So are they ready developmentally to be on a social media app with tens or hundreds of millions of individuals on there that suddenly we're giving our children access to? Are they ready for the mean comments, the nice comments, balancing those? So one, understand the app, help them download it, and then help them decide who their friends or followers are. Oftentimes when I work with youth, they'll tell me they have 1 to 10 friends offline, and when they go online, on average, about 300 friends or followers. So how do we go from 5 to 300? We need to balance it, and we need to think about the qualities of these individuals that we're adding into our online worlds. And then it goes back to what Mike said earlier, it's looking at their privacy settings. Most of these apps, or some of them that our youth are on, by default, they're open to the public. Instagram, I can set up an account tonight. It's going to be open to the public. Twitter will be open to the public, unless I enable my privacy settings. So as a parent, making sure, are you ready for it? Are you ready to be on there with them? Are you ready to friend them? Are you ready to follow them? Because parenting cannot stop when our child picks up a piece of technology. It has to continue.
Along the same lines of being able to spot when your child may be in trouble or in over their head, but what about when your child is the aggressor? What about when you have a child who's actually engaging in the abusive behavior towards someone else? If you're not monitoring them all the time, if you're not checking their private messages, are there ways to know or to be aware? To any of our panelists. I know these are tough questions.
I would, with regard to middle school and probably, through 9th grade, I would suggest that parents check those things. You check the messages, you see what kind of things they're doing. If you're paying the bill for the phone, you have a right to that. Kids, I know 12-year-olds always want to cite, they have a right to privacy and you're invading their space. But for their safety, they are the child and we are the parents, and we need to check those things. I think that parents would be surprised if you check the messaging to see what your child says, because 9 times out of 10 they're saying something inappropriate every once in a while, and it's just because that's the conversation and that's how it's flowing. And so they need to be called on that. They need to be taught what's responsible, what's not, what's good citizenship. We're on a big roll with the good citizenship part, because if they just have those conversations online and they become comfortable with, then they start carrying those conversations out into public and having those kind of conversations with kids. And we don't want them, we want them to be responsible. We want them to be well-rounded all the way around.
Under Sheriff Jack Campbell.
And Jim, I think also the cyber bullies sometimes also manifest in physical bullying out on the playground, and probably have had some issues at school with this in the past. But identifying the ones that are just cyber bullies, that they physically don't confront anybody, is the hardest issue here. And this is generations old advice of communication. We as parents have to get our nose out of the computer and get our nose out of the cell phone and communicate with the kids and understand what they're going through. And again, whether it's the bullying side of this or the victim side of this, you have to communicate with these kids and force out of them if you have to. Keep prying it. We know we can ask the right questions to get it out of them, but you have to put in the effort and put down your own cell phone.
And that brings us back to something, Jack, that you and John Milheiser both touched on in your opening remarks, and a very straightforward and to the point question from the audience, which asks simply, Is bullying a crime? Again, things happen in schoolyards all the time. Kids are sometimes mean to each other. Where is the dividing line that says, okay, now you've gone too far and now it's going to be an issue for outside intervention?
And that's a good question, and it's difficult difficult to define, because you could have some actions that for the recipient might be okay, but for another recipient, because of just that the way they are, it could be a crime. It is very difficult. Also, in the criminal code, there is no cyberbullying charge. There are harassment by electronic means, cyber stalking, all disorderly conduct, all these different things that are considered cyberbullying, but there's no real charge of cyberbullying. So it really just depends on the circumstances. It's kind of like the old definition of pornography. I know when I see it, and so it just depends on the circumstances.
Does part of this depend upon the intent or perceived intent? If somebody posts, I'm going to kill you because they're playing around versus I'm going to kill you because they're really angry, can you divine that intent, and does that make a difference in how a case may be adjudicated?
Yes, intent would come into play, because for certain criminal charges, it has to be for the purpose of harassing. For example, harassment by electronic means, you have to transmit electronic messages for the purpose of harassing. Same with cyber stalking, and there's some other elements that are needed. So intent of the person delivering it is important, but also the way that victim, we look at him in these cases, victim receives it, also important too.
Jack Campbell?
I want to add a little bit to that. If we were to take a report, some of the things we would look at is maybe the language that's used in there. As you said, if I'm going to kill you is in there. It certainly grabs our attention, but it may be more of what was prior to that, what came after that, the persistence in the text messages, the number or emails that are coming through, and then obviously any act of furtherance. If they show up at your house after they told you they're going to kill you, it's something we're certainly going to look into. As I alluded to earlier, rarely are we going to make a physical arrest on scene. Most of the time we're going to forward this information to John and let him cipher it out in his office.
And the example I used is a pretty stark, a black and white example. If you start making bodily threats, that's a pretty clear line. What about if it's just language that's cruel or insulting? Where does that cross a line from typical schoolyard behavior to something more serious?
Prior to all these advances in technology, they said these things physically to each other out on the playground or in classrooms. And now we have to differentiate, and we have to try to determine what is simply just kids being kids, and then where is it acting in furtherance that now somebody's really afraid or it's affecting them mentally. So that's some things we have to look at, and that is a hard call, is what is simply kids being kids and what's going too far. And again, that's something we will just take the report and ship it upstairs and let John's office look at it.
Cindy Knight from District 186.
Well, I think we could see a continuum of this also. In some of our conversations, we may be assuming that kids are equal as peers. And if you throw in some additional characteristics of age difference or a balance of power, so to speak, as well as potentially challenges that one or the other may operate with, there are certain characteristics that I think begin to really tip those scales a lot, and sometimes clarify the picture to know where we need to go with follow-up, but sometimes I just think those are some of the characteristics that naturally we would want to look at in terms of defining that line.
This is a live town hall meeting on News Talk 970 WMAY. We are coming to you from the Springfield High School Commons during this Anti-Bullying Month. Tonight's broadcast is sponsored by Springfield Pepsi, the Illinois Educators Credit Union, Waterworks Car Wash, the Springfield YMCA, Jill Steiner here representing the YMCA this evening, Lincoln Prairie Behavioral Health Center. We thank them all for this support, for their support of this very important event. I want to bring Renise Kropp back into the conversation now. She is a senior here at Springfield High School. She has been through this because one of the questions that came from the audience is just asking, how did your friends support you? Part of the challenge here is helping children develop the coping mechanisms to be able to deal with these sorts of things when they happen. So clearly you've weathered the storm, you've gotten through it. What were some of the ways that you were able to cope with that and come through on the other side?
Well, my friends, they were getting text messages and everything like that, and one of my friends, she started to get, bumping into it in the hallways because she was friends with me, and I didn't really want them to get involved because I didn't want what I was going through to affect them because it was my problem, and I I appreciate them stepping in and, being there for me and supporting me every day through it. But I just think that the situation, it really shows you who your true friends are and who's really going to stick by you through hard times.
To our educators, again, that question of helping kids with these coping mechanisms. I mean, we want parents to intervene. We want teachers and administrators and even law enforcement to intervene when it's appropriate. But we also want to teach kids how to deal with these sorts of challenges because they may happen even in adulthood. How do we go about doing that? How do we help children develop the defense mechanisms, as it were, to allow them to cope with these situations? Karen Stramer, again, assistant principal at Franklin Middle School.
Well, I know that we try to help the kids develop skills that include confidence, and knowing who they are, and also controlling what they say and what they do, and, the ability to turn it off. Don't keep looking at it. Change up. Maybe select different friends. We also teach kids how to address the bullying in the school. We have social worker and psychologist, and we have teachers that can specifically talk to kids about how to address the bully and how to gently confront it and ask, why are you doing this to me, before it gets too big. We also have kids that come in and they just want to talk, and they want to feel out an adult and find out, what's the best way to handle it. So we always encourage that kind of stuff, and we also encourage kids to talk to their parents, because their parents are going to be the number one influence in their life, and they're going to be the one that they're going to be the one answer that they listen to more than any other. So we always encourage them to talk to their parents about the problems, and every once in a while turn it off. There's a couple tips that I wanted to throw in that Christine has given us for middle school kids, and one is that parents, the rule is the phone goes off at 10 o'clock at night. It's on the counter, it gets turned off, the internet's off, so that it can stop, because kids sometimes just need a break. Because they can, they fester and they want to say one more thing, and then it just builds, and 10 o'clock's a good time to go to bed. Let it all go till the next morning.
I think another key thing also is re-educating students about what is proper around bullying. You have to re-educate bystanders about what their role is, what they should do if they see somebody bullied. The victim about, what they should do if somebody's bullying them. And like I said before, we do have consequences for our students that bully, but really what you're trying to do here, so they will stop the bullying, is just make them accountable for what they're doing and be able to make them see what they're doing to other people. And there are programs out there to re-educate everyone involved in the bullying process. It is a arduous process. Because it takes a lot of groundwork to do it, but we do have programs out there to address it.
And I just want to add one more thing, that we do a lot of concern calls to parents, where maybe it's not a school issue, it's a potential school issue, it involves kids that go to the same school. We do concern calls to parents to kind of just tell them that this is something that you need to look at and handle, and sort of just a courtesy call, because a lot of times parents don't check it, and then they check it and they come in and they're like, oh my gosh, and they've seen how it works, and those are the aha moments that we really appreciate, that when people get the expansiveness of the internet and the pros and the cons.
I think what I really like about this conversation, Jim, is that these are ideas and solutions and steps coming from everybody. I work from that portion of the picture where we do have some specialists in our schools that can be, go deeper with this sort of response, but that isn't what everybody needs. Everybody needs these caring adults, and everybody that's in this audience tonight, because that's how we're going to learn to combat this problem, is when we all become part of that solution. I think that makes sense to me, because there aren't enough one-on-one people to fix every one of these problems. It's going to have to be all of our eyes and all of our ears, and all of us being willing to address and take the steps to unplug, to say no, to guide our kids differently, and support the kids that are doing the right things. I think those are key parts. So I really like what our panel has shared already.
As with most problems of any sort, early intervention is better, trying to spot it and nip it in the bud quickly. I want to bring Christine Feller back into this because you talked a little bit earlier about some of the national stats and what studies have shown. Is there sort of a profile as to who bullies and what do they get from it? What's the gratification that may come from it? And also then who's most vulnerable to this? Who's most likely to be targeted for this?
All right, several questions there. Looking at different research that's out there, as far as a profile, I would not say that there's a profile. It could be any student. The anonymity or perceived anonymity that the internet provides students makes it easy for any child to get on there and attempt to do it. We have to remind them that there is an IP address that can be collected, and there's different information that's out there. That's a deterrent for some students, knowing that yes, the sheriff's office, the state's attorney's office, we could figure that out. So there's a deterrent that way, but it's coaching them. When we look at students and what are the main factors, maybe the risk factors, the Youth Voice Project with some research that was done, and looking and surveying teens across the country, the top 3 differences that teens make fun of when it comes to bullying is going to be 1, what do I look like? 2, what is my body shape? And 3, what is my race? Those were the top 3 about 2 years ago. Every community, every school is going to be a little bit different.
And a lot of this predates, obviously, the internet era. Why do children single these things out? Why do they try to strike at those vulnerabilities? Is there a sense of power that comes from it? If you're holding somebody else down, does that make you feel somehow more dominant and stronger? And Karen Stramer, you're nodding your head yes on that.
We are all in search of power in our lives, and kids are no different. And they're testing boundaries, and they're trying to develop into adults. And so they will take what they have to get all the information they can to try to do that. And that's why there always need to be adults stepping in and setting and reestablishing boundaries and saying no and saying turn it off. And, everybody wants to fit in. Everybody wants to be, the one everybody likes. And it goes through phases. And in middle school, you got a 12-year-old girl that maybe gets a new outfit and thinks she looks really good. And so she takes a picture of herself and she puts it out there. And you don't want kids doing that, because then you're opening yourself up for criticism. And where she's doing something to make herself feel good, it comes back 100-fold bad. And so we want to try to, as parents and adults, encourage kids not to put out everything, that everything doesn't need to be on the internet and shared with the whole world. Not every thought in your head needs to come out in a voice. Sometimes it's okay to just think things and not say them out loud. So, it's the same thing with the internet. It feels like they're by themselves and that they can just say and type freely and, be passionate or be poetic. And sometimes that doesn't need to be out there. And as adults, we need to teach kids that there are limits to what we need to say.
And Jim, I want to follow up on that. The communication is so important because it's important to tell the kids. They think that if they send a Snapchat, it lasts 10 seconds or something. But unless somebody takes a screenshot of it, or they just send it to their friend, nobody else will see it. When they send these messages, when they take pictures, they're out there forever. So we talk about some intended bullying, but there's also unintended bullying, where somebody's best friends one day, but we know with kids the next week, they're not best friends anymore, they're best friends with somebody else. So something they said then gets around. And I know that's a big problem. I have an eighth grade daughter, so
secrets.
Right.
When
so
they're no
happens.
longer friends.
But it's that communication and realizing, hey, if you put something out there in cyberspace, it is there forever. It's not just going to your friend. It is going to be possibly shown to everybody. So that's really, really important.
It is an important point. I think we should make the point that in a lot of these situations, while it may seem like the biggest thing in the world, one day, as Ronise has shown, it does get better, and people get through it and they survive. But we know that there are extreme cases where it can go even much worse. It may lead to suicide. It may lead to a student violently lashing out. And John Milheiser and Jack Campbell, I'll address this back to you as to, are there ways to detect that when something is headed that? And I already know the answer to that. Unfortunately, we've seen it in situation over and over and over again where people said, I had no idea it was going to result in something like this. But how do we try to avoid that consequence? How do we try to prevent those very tragic situations?
I think it's just have that open line of communication. If you see something, ask questions. Ask questions of your children. If you see something, report it to authorities, talk to them and communicate. I think that's the most important. And when we talk about it leads to something horrible, there's a criminal charge for inducement to commit suicide. That's on the books because of some very, very tragic cases where because of bullying, horrific things have happened. And I'll pass on to Jack.
We've seen some of this sexting going on, and I think that's one of the most tragic things going on there, because not just somebody making a mistake of doing this, but also we're seeing other photos used of other people with somebody else's name on it. And it's something that can tear up, especially a teenage girl, for sure. So it's something that it's so difficult to detect. And as John said, and everybody on the panel has said, it's about communication and making sure the kids know it's okay to come and talk to you about it, and even show you what was sent to them, a screenshot, a text message, and keep that line of communication open so that we can work together to fix it.
And, sorry, Jim, real quick on the sexting, which is actually in the statute as minors involved in electronic dissemination of indecent visual depictions. So, but basically sexting. And what it is, it's not for the person that took the initial picture of themselves and sent it. The specific language is a minor shall not distribute or disseminate an indecent visual depiction of another minor through the use of a computer or electronic means. So it's, a lot of times the kids will say, hey, wait, it's not a picture of me, somebody else sent it to me, I just forwarded it to somebody else. So it's important to tell them, hey, that is a criminal offense too. You can be brought into court for that.
Now, you drew the distinction about images. Obviously, sexting can also just be inappropriate texting language and things. Does that also fall under the criminal statute, or is that just a problem that could come back to bite somebody, but isn't necessarily a matter for the legal system?
Well, words could be a criminal offense also, and they're disorderly conduct, and there's some other criminal statutes that could be violated by words alone.
Again, to our audience here at Springfield High School, or to those listening at home, you still have time to submit your questions here at Springfield High. You can submit them in writing, and we'll try to get as many of those in before the top of the hour. You can also email your questions to bully@wmay.com. From the audience, and Karen Stramer, I think you noted this earlier, the internet is a big place, and we're talking a lot about some of the darker side of it here. But are there assets on the internet? Are there ways that the internet can be used to help young people in this situation and to turn cyberspace around to make it a positive?
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, who can not think that the kids they're way ahead of us in being able to retrieve information and to learn, and all of that is wonderful. But they are still children, and like anything, I mean, when we were kids, what did we do? We had a dictionary, and maybe we looked up the words that we thought were inappropriate just to get a giggle. I mean, you look back at that now and think that was ridiculous. But if you move that ahead 30 years to the kids now, they have this vast vat of information that they can access all kinds of things, and they've got to have the boundaries and the structure and the supervision like anything else. I mean, we don't let kids go watch X-rated movies, so we have to monitor what they're doing on the internet. We need to see what they're looking at. They need to know that we're checking that like we would anything else. If you've got a high school kid and they come home and you give them a hug when they come home every Saturday night just to smell their breath, that's okay. You're the parent. It's kind of the same thing. You want to put spot checks in place to make sure that the kids know you're watching, because they kind of want to be supervised. They'll never admit that, but they need to be checked.
One of the big challenges with this is that it does seem so relentless. As was noted, this can be 24/7, all day, all night, all weekend. It seems to never let up. Ronise, when did you finally see some light at the end of the tunnel when you were going through this? Was there a point where you can say, okay, I am going to get through this?
Towards the middle, once I started, me and my mom were told about the Bully Prevention Task Force, and then once we were directed to Miss Jacobs, a social worker for Springfield, she really helped me understand that why people do the things they do, and that it's not really all bad, and that there are people who are here for you and that are trying to help you get through stuff like this.
Were there consequences for your bullies, or was this just a question of you simply had to resolve on your own to get past it and get through it?
Well, there was a police report filed on one, and a week later, we were all suspended. Weeks after that, she would continue to try stuff. And like weeks, maybe months later, she continued to do things, and she got suspended again. And now she's no longer in the school.
Now, you said you were all suspended. If
Yes.
you don't mind my asking, how did that happen that you were involved in that?
There was one day after lunch, we were going to our lockers to go to fourth hour. One of my friends decided, she heard that one of the girls had said something about her. She went up to her. Me and my friend, we were standing like on the other side of the hallway, like listening. We tried to walk away. Security jumps in, pulls everybody apart and everything. We go to our class. Next thing I know it, I'm getting called down because it could have potentially turned into a fight, and I was suspended for 3 days.
Mike Zimmer, let me bring you back into this, because this is something we often hear about as well when a situation arises, and then students have an instinct to retaliate, to fight back, but that can then get themselves in trouble as well, even though they may have initially been the victim. How do you sort that all out, and how do you deal with it appropriately so the students don't cross the line, but they still, again, have that tendency to want to defend themselves in a situation?
That's where it becomes complicated, because this takes anytime you have a bullying situation, you have to make sure that you not only investigate what the victim is telling you, but also the person being accused, the bully, they also have rights, to have their side heard. So a lot of times, I don't think people realize this. Karen could probably speak to it a little better than I, because she's currently in that position. But some of these cases can take you sometimes most of the day, because you want to make sure that you're being fair and impartial to everybody concerned. And the thing we try to teach students in the schools, and I know students sometimes get to the point where, okay, I've had enough and I have to retaliate on my own. But we try to teach students in the school there are other avenues. We are here to help you. This may be a process. It may take us a little while to get there, but students, I think, have to trust if they come to adults in the building, they are going to try to resolve the situation.
When this starts to happen, when parents start to see these signs, is it generally advisable to try to bring the school into it, to bring authorities into it, to try to resolve it on their own, maybe just go talk to the other student's parent? Is there a standard process for this, or do you just have to look at each case individually?
I think you have to look at each one individually. You may have a situation where the students involved aren't in the same school. So you might have to look at other avenues. A lot of times students are in the same school. A lot of what we see in the schools, where we're having conflicts, is that generally, and Karen can probably verify this, a lot of these start outside the school day. It may be something that happened the evening before, it may be something that happened over the weekend, and then, it's brought into school. And then you deal with it. There are occasions where parents will give us the heads up that, we had a problem last night. We had some cyberbullying going on, or actual bullying going on in the neighborhood. And when that happens, it makes administrators and teachers' jobs a lot easier, because they can start as soon as the students hit the door to deal with it. In the cases where we're not aware of it, they didn't manifest into something else in the school. That's when it becomes much more difficult, when we don't know what happened outside the school day, because we are not in the position to monitor everyone's computers and cell phones outside the school day.
Christine Feller, over and over the questions that we're getting via email, via the people here tonight, seem to come back to just one basic question, which is, what do I do when you start to see this happen? Should people document the instances? Should they keep a record of what they are seeing and what their child is experiencing? Does it have to be that elaborate? There was a time when if this happened in a neighborhood, one parent would just go talk to the other parent and they'd sort it out, or maybe even duke it out. I realize these are not those days any longer, but is there a strategy, a process? Parents seem to be just looking for find me a checklist. What can I do to kind of work my way through this?
Sure. Some of the things that we recommend, number one is going to be to support your child, meaning put your focus on helping your child, just like our student on the panel tonight. Don't jump on your child's account and try to respond back. Now we have an adult, a 40-year-old going after a 12-year-old. We've just shifted that balance of power again. Then as a parent, work with them with that technology. Unfriend people, unfollow people. Yes, you're right. Document what it is. Take screenshots. Have proof of what has happened. As a parent, if you think you know who the other child is, speak to the other parent. Most likely that parent does not have a clue that their child is doing that. And then as parents here tonight, be open for that conversation. As we mentioned earlier, cyberbullies, they don't have a profile. Any one of our children could be the child on the other side of a digital device saying these mean things. So be open for that conversation. So block, unfriend, leave some of the apps. And then as a parent, start removing the devices at night or turn off the Wi-Fi. I know students are typically like, lady, you're crazy. But again, at the end of the day, when I go to sleep, I go to bed to go to sleep. I'm not up to watch what my children, what my teenagers may or may not be doing online. And so we need to control those things that we can control with them.
Are there certain platforms that are more prone to this than others? Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat? Or what's the next big thing that could become this arena for this sort of abuse and harassment?
Well, for Illinois youth, what the sites that they prefer to be on, now not all of them are social media, but they prefer the YouTube, they prefer FaceTime, which is the video chat, and then we move into Snapchat, then we move into Snapchat, then Vine, then Facebook, and some of those. Facebook is falling off. Some students tell me, I'm on Facebook, so mom and dad, guardian, feel good about knowing what I'm doing, but I spend all my time on Snapchat. And when we say Snapchat, that's a 13 plus. We looked at our 3rd through 5th graders in Illinois. They're on Snapchat as well. So again, knowing those sites, there are other anonymous sites. I share those at parent nights. I don't like to share those in a venue with students because I don't want to give our students other ideas of other places to go. But they're anonymous apps. They're apps that are based purely off of geolocation. That information, law enforcement, they can still have access to that. But as a parent, go and see what are the trending apps in the App Store. What is free and what are getting the downloads? Set up your alerts, your news alerts to see what trending apps are also out there. That should help them feel like they're part of that world.
John, go ahead.
Real quick, as far as what parents can do, if the kind of advice Christine said, talking to them, if it doesn't stop, contact law enforcement. Don't be afraid to do that. Because the way it works here in Sangamon County, juvenile reports go through juvenile probation typically. So juvenile probation will see those reports. Oftentimes they'll defer it, meet with the suspect child, meet with the family, meet with the victim, meet with the victim's family, and try to work it out that way. They also will keep a kind of a catalog of those reports. So if you don't report it, nobody maybe knows that this person's doing it. They could be doing it to other people. So it's important to know if you have one bully that is bullying a bunch of different people, that way we can keep track of that. I always tell people, try to report it to law enforcement, because that way we can keep track, and when you see a pattern by one person, that can really tip law enforcement off to, hey, something needs to be done. We need to step in at this point. But if it's not reported, then we don't know, then Jack's folks don't know that this is going on.
We've heard some candid talk this evening from Ranice about her own experience and how she came through stronger on the other side, but a question from the audience asks for that same sort of candor from the rest of our panelists, asking, have any of you been bullied in your life? And how did you deal with it? Obviously, for most of us, not in the internet age, but still, how did you cope with it and come through stronger?
You mean besides Sheriff Williamson? Oh, no, it's not something that I've ever dealt with. Again, being a little bit older, it wasn't prevalent. It was more of a physical, face-to-face type of thing when I was in school, and luckily at my job right now, it's not something I deal with at all.
Again, very fortunate. I didn't have a cell phone until I was an adult and had a job. So it's a lot different. It's a lot easier for kids if they think something to not wait till the next day to tell somebody face to face. They can just send it out in a message. So it is a lot different world out there. I have 2 daughters in District 186, and I cross my fingers every day when they go to school. So it's difficult.
I don't mean to make light of this, but look at my size. No, I was never bullied.
Well,
Nor did I bully because I was big. I never did that.
Another question from the audience, though, and this is a very interesting question, asking that can you consider it in some extent that even the bully is in some way a victim, that this is not an innate character trait, this is learned behavior. Sometimes kids get picked on and then turn around and pick on others. We talk a lot about this in terms of empathy for the victim. Is there room for empathy for the bully, too?
Well, I think, Jim, that's where we want to do some investigating and build that relationship even with the aggressor. Because as you said, there is evidence to show that some kids cope with having been a target by just upping the ante and turning the tables. So I think everybody's got a story, everybody's got a past, and everybody has circumstances that lead to their behavior. So I think we would want to look at that for sure.
I just want to add that, you know, if we're dealing with students, it's in our best interest to deal with everyone and to offer support to everyone. In the end, we want them to move on to their next level of development, whether it be high school, whether it be college, whether it be the workforce, whether it be the community, as responsible adults. So yes, we do want to have concern for the bully because there obviously is a need for power there, and there may be a lack of supervision, or there may be uneasy feelings sitting there too.
Panelists, we're down to our final 3 minutes here, and I'd like to go through in turn each of you one more time and have you offer maybe just your best piece of advice, your best suggestion to a parent, to a student, to anybody who might be going through this. And Ranice Crop, I'd like to start with you since you have been through this, you've walked the walk. What's your advice to a student who may find themselves in the shoes that you were in just a couple of years ago?
Do not respond to anything that they say to you, whether it be face-to-face, through Facebook. Don't respond to anything because you're just showing that they're getting to you and that they're doing what they want to do.
Great advice and very, very difficult to do, but if you can master that, you really are almost all the way there. Jack Campbell.
You know, the panel up here, we get involved kind of after the fact. What I would ask and suggest is that you be a parent at home. Don't let it get to the school. Don't let it get to law enforcement. It's not our job to raise your kids. We have to deal with the aftermath. So if you stop it at home, then we don't have to deal with it down the road.
State's Attorney John Milhiser.
Again, it's been said, and it can't be said enough, communication with your children. Talk to them, be involved in everything they do, be involved on those sites they're going to, who their friends are, where they're going. That, I think, is the most important. And if it gets to the point where law enforcement needs to step in, make sure you contact them. Even if it's something small, you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't contact law enforcement. I don't want to ruin this kid's life. I mean, you need to. It's very important because this person could be doing it to somebody else, and we need to stop it before it gets too far.
Springfield School Board President Mike Zimmers.
I'm going to kind of repeat what I started off with. This is about safety for your children. It's not about privacy. Your child can have privacy in different ways, but this is about their utmost safety, and I think that's one of our most important jobs as a parent, is ensuring the safety of our students, our children.
Franklin Middle School Assistant Principal Karen Stramer.
I would encourage parents to be good role models with technology. Every once in a while, put it down, have conversations, real conversations. I'm going to ask that you not text your children when they're at school. And I would also just encourage you to set those strong boundaries and to teach responsibility with everything, just like you would cleaning, doing chores. If they're going to have a phone, they need to be responsible because it's a serious piece of equipment.
Christine Feller, Illinois Attorney General's Office.
I'm going to echo what Renee said, and as students don't type back, it makes the situation bigger as opposed to better. And again, what Karen said, it's being a role model to our students and modeling empathy, putting ourselves in other people's shoes.
And finally, Cindy Knight of District 186.
Well, I think simply, Jim, I would say don't give up. And whether that's to our parents or to our kids, find that person who is going to listen to you and help you take action. I think don't give up is the message I want to leave with.
Our thanks to Springfield High School, District 186 Superintendent Jennifer Gill. Thank you for your hospitality to all of you in attendance this evening and all of you listening at home. And a thank you to our sponsors as well for this very important conversation on cyberbullying. StopBullying.gov has more information. And we thank you all again for your time this evening.